Spectres, welcome back to the Mass Effect Lorecast. This is your host, Tom. I'm here with the guy who knows way more than most people should about Mass Effect N7, The Legend. How's it go, man?
It's good, and I've got my nerd glasses on today.
What? I've got my I've always had my nerd glasses on, but you don't always have your nerd glasses on.
I don't always, but I had to wake up early, and my eyes just weren't feeling the contacts. So.
Oh, well, bummer, dude. But what's good news is that we're back to some lore episodes. And now that we're all done with medicine, we can just move on to something else, right? Because there's nothing else having to do with medicine. I can't think of any other like notable doctors in the trilogy. There's like...
I kept thinking that we were done. I really did. After the interview with Dr. Greg, I thought we were over it. And then I went back into my notes and research mode, and I was like, oh my gosh, we have more to talk about, which I know our listeners are probably just really bummed about.
Yeah, probably really bummed. Or at least some of them will be fans of this topic this week. So what are we talking about?
So there is, like I said, a huge breadth of those medical related topics, but there's still a couple key physicians that we haven't talked about. So today we are dissecting the character. I tried to come up with a witty intro on the fly. It's not going to happen, but Dr. Lexi Tapero.
Dissecting, I heard that there. Wait, so yeah. Doctor who? Doctor what?
Now, this is a doctor from Andromeda. She is an Asari starts on the Hyperion and then moves to the Tempest. She was supposed to stay on the Ark with the... Sorry, there's a very loud car outside.
I'm just going to pretend that that's gas coming from you.
I did do an eating challenge yesterday, so that wouldn't be out of the question. Yeah. It was for work, and I downed a 12-egg omelet. It was something else, but...
Wow.
Kind of a weird story we'll have to talk about off air. And if you haven't joined the Robots Discord, this is a perfect time to market that. I'll talk to you about it on there. But about Dr. Tapero. She was supposed to stay on the Ark. Mm-hmm. And she was supposed to work with the initiative to wake up colonists and kind of tend to their medical needs. But when Ryder's father dies and then they become the Pathfinder, her perspective changes a little bit. And I have a clip here that kind of demonstrates that. I'm going to go ahead and play it. We'll see if it plays through my mic.
Actually, I've got it set up. We could even put it up on the screen for the video.
Oh, so then by all means.
Let's just go with this then. Oh, hold on. I was muted because we had somebody subscribe to the channel. Thank you for subbing, fam. All right, here we go.
We all have off days.
I always hoped to work in the field, but everything's happening so quickly.
Focus on the positive. It helps.
I guess this is my opportunity to study alien species firsthand. Getting a Ket specimen aboard the Hyperion would be difficult, but here...
What?
A Ket corpse. For autopsy. A live subject would be better, but I'm not greedy.
Why do you care about the Ket?
Harry didn't tell you? I'm a specialist in alien anatomy. My thesis on Krogan virility and aggression is what got me in the initiative.
You know what I love the most about these Andromeda clips? Is that it's so impressive that these kindergartners are achieving so much in space. I couldn't go without
achieved a lot.
I couldn't not bring up the weird proportions again.
It's the proportions. It is the frostbite engine. It is the
textures are good. Like I'm looking at it again. I don't want to go on to this too long, but like the hair on his face, the pores on the skin, like all of that stuff's pretty good. But everybody's like a kindergartner.
I think there's a lack of, I want to say, nonverbal language. So body language. Those
is
subtle
that it?
Movements.
Oh, maybe that's
the
part
subtle
of it too.
movements, the subtle facial expressions. I feel like there's something that was lost in translation between the Unreal Engine and the Frostbite engine.
Right, because if you take any two screenshots and could just compare them not in motion, you can clearly see that like it's an upgrade in graphics quality. But there's something about the character designs and the way they move and the proportions of the body that just are just that they're into the uncanny valley more than just like I don't mind looking at the older graphics. I mean, they still look like people. They just look like older graphics.
I feel like that's why screenshots from Andromeda look great. Mm-hmm. Gameplay does not look as great.
Yeah, it's so weird. But anyway, okay, so
So she talks about how she wants to, her specialization is in alien biology. And so she views joining the Tempest as an opportunity if they bring back a Ket.
Right.
If they bring back a Ket Corp, she can learn a lot more about this brand new life form. And it must be incredibly medically fascinating to her. And so she has this specialization and interest in alien biology, which is also driving her to do this. But she also senses that there's a need there, and she always wanted to do field work. So she didn't want to be stuck behind a desk.
Right. So, I mean, that makes sense. It sounds like an amazing opportunity.
It does, and I can understand her hesitation. You can sense a little bit of it in her voice there, because I'd be kind of scared about that too if I spent 200 some years learning medicine and really staying behind a desk, and now all of a sudden in this new galaxy that's been marketed to us as a veritable haven of habitable worlds, we learn that A, that's not true, B, the guy that was supposed to lead us is dead, and C, his offspring who have very little leadership experience whatsoever are taking the helm, and D, there's also a very hostile alien race that has an incursion in the current sector. So it's kind of scary. But it is an opportunity to learn more, and I think that's what drives Dr. Tapero. Now, I mentioned that she had 200 years of time to learn, give or take. That's because she's about 275 years old. We know she grew up in Omega.
Okay.
And what do we know about Omega, except that it's a very seedy planet that has a very sizable gap between the haves and have-nots. It's like Sin City.
Yeah, I'm sure that wasn't well, unless you grew up as one of the haves, but statistically speaking, you probably didn't.
Yeah, unless you were like in with Arya, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. But her mom was a dancer, so might have actually known Arya tangentially. And her dad was a Turian bouncer. So quite a upbringing to go from that to doctor. And the way that she started was because she patched up her dad every time he got roughed up.
Oh, geez.
And her parents remembered how good she was at doing so. So they shelled out for medical school to give her a better shot at life. Yeah,
no, I mean, that totally, like, you're just kind of like learning in the trenches, sort of. Like, I mean, those are kind of trenches.
Yeah, I know, right? I don't think any child should have to grow up tending into wound care for their parents. But that is how Dr. Lexi Tapero grew up. And she did go away to medical school. She got out of Omega, and I take it that shortly thereafterward, then she joined the Initiative. But, now that I'm saying this, if you're like, we hear human beings complain about how long medical schooling takes.
Oh, yeah.
If you're an Asari, how long is your medical schooling going to take?
Well, I mean, just imagine, I mean, not only are their lives longer and all of that, but they're also aware of so many more species. And their society is integrated with all of these other species. So it's one thing to learn everything you need to know in order to at least to just be a general practicing physician for humans, let alone anybody. Like, wow.
Maybe the assistance of VIs and AIs kind of eliminates some of the burden of constant memory of the knowledge. But right. With her specialization in alien biology, I think it's safe to say that medical school took her longer than just a few years. Right. And if her voice does sound familiar to anyone, that's because she is voiced by none other than Natalie Dormer.
From Game of Thrones, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
From Marjorie.
Yeah. Very different characters.
Very different characters. And it kind of is a testament to Natalie Dormer's range of talent that she can go from Marjorie, this populist queen, right, to this very clinical and detached doctor.
Yeah. Very, very like charismatic, really balanced, very different, like completely different scales. Like I would imagine that Marjorie in Game of Thrones is much more, just out there, likes to talk to people, those kinds of things. And although everybody knows I'm not a big fan of Andromeda, I didn't get that far in it. But I would imagine that she's just not quite that social.
Yeah. Well, she doesn't feel like it. Certainly not when you're playing. I mean, you definitely get to know her a little bit better, but she is Ryder's doctor, and she is not like the other doctors that we've ever had in Mass Effect.
In that you don't have a crush on her?
Well, I don't. I also didn't have a crush on Dr. Michelle, so I don't. I certainly do have a crush on Dr. Chakwas, but
right.
Part of that is because of Dr. Chakwas's personality, which is very different from Dr. Tapero. Dr. Tapero is much more strictly business. Just business here, Ryder, at least at first. And I think a male Ryder figures this out very quickly. I've never played as a female Ryder, so I don't know, and I know someone's going to correct me on it. But I know as male Ryder, you can try and flirt with her off the bat, and it doesn't go well.
Okay, so we've got another clip here. Check this out.
My thesis on Krogan virility and aggression is what got me in the initiative.
I had no idea. I'd love to hear more. Over dinner, maybe?
Thing is, Ryder, you're not my type.
What's your type?
Not a patient. I need to be able to look at you clinically without distractions.
Am I distracting?
Not nearly as much as you think you are. But we were discussing the cat.
That's good.
He just got roasted. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what the scene is like for Fem Ryder, but for male Ryder, that was like, I remember playing through that and I was like, man, buddy, you better sit the fuck down after that one.
Stop trying, dude. She gave you the clear, like, no chance. Like, this is one of those things that guys just need to learn because we're kind of dumb when it comes to reading signals, but like, there are some signals that are just like, probably not, but maybe you can convince me. But then there are signals like this that are just like, no chance, never going to happen. Let's just keep on moving on with our professional relationship, please. Yeah,
exactly. And so he got shot down. She says that you're not my type. Mm-hmm. And then I think she tries to hedge it with, because you're my patient.
Yeah, right. It feels like, I need to give him some sort of explanation here that he can't argue with. Well, you can't argue that you're my patient, so we'll just go with that.
Right. And so I question whether or not the way that Natalie Dormer at least delivered that line, I question whether or not it was sincerely just based on ethics, mm-hmm. or whether she's just backpedaling behind that doctor-patient reason, because it kind of feels like, look, even if you weren't my patient, like,
yeah, still not interested.
And then the response from Ryder, like, oh, am I distracting? It's like, you know what? This is why I said no. right here.
Right. Yeah. The fact that you feel like, dude, you did not get it the first time. Now you're trying a second time. You better get it this time, buddy. Yeah.
Right. So we get, that's pretty early in the game, I think. And we get a pretty quick understanding of her personality, not just from that remark, but from that entire conversation. We understand very quickly that Dr. Tapero is quite analytical. She's more clinical than any of the previous doctors that we have in Mass Effect. And what I mean when I say that is that Dr. Chakwas was just as likely to, like, put a cast on your broken bone as she was to knock back a beer with you.
Right.
As we heard from Dr. Greg, that is not typical of doctors.
Yeah, well, yes, right. Generally, I mean, I think this is more typical of the doctor, like the doctor-patient thing, like maintaining professional distance, making sure that you don't get too involved emotionally with your patients, all of that kind of thing. Yeah,
and so it's really, and Dr. Michelle is a little different because she's kind of in like 1.5 games, but she is present in the Mass Effect original trilogy, but it's still a very different interaction that the player can have with Dr. Tapero. And Dr. Tapero has this dry wit very dry wit, much more so than I think Dr. Chakwas had. I'm not saying that Dr. Chakwas couldn't be sarcastic. She certainly could.
Yeah.
But this seems to be the MO of Dr. Tapero, which, in my opinion, doesn't mesh well with the young adult novel sounding lines from Ryder.
Right?
It sounds like something from a young adult novel, right? And when we're about to play another line, Ryder walks into Dr. Tapero's quarters after hours, and at least at first, she doesn't really take kindly to it.
It's my night off.
I don't remember approving that.
I can break bones just as well as I can mend them, Pathfinder.
What are you reading?
Harry's latest report on Sarah. She's restless, but on the mend.
So you're not really taking the night off.
Work-life balance has never been my strong suit.
You love what you do. Nothing wrong with that.
Tell that to my exes.
So man, that was cold. I can break bones as well as repair them.
Yeah, which, depending on the proximity of when that happened to the first conversation, it's like, dude, stop pushing. Like, especially at least from just if you only take the line that Ryder says, I don't remember approving your night off.
Right.
Has anyone ever had a boss like that?
This is verging on the abusing your power over somebody role, section like that. Like, this is getting sketchy. Like, that comment is to use internet vernacular, cringe.
It's sus.
It's sus and cringe. And everybody under 30 just vomited it.
Yeah. Well, it's not when you're playing through the games. I don't think it's as creepy as when you take it out of context. But when you're playing through the games, there's still a distinct difference, I think, in how that line is delivered. If you chose to try and flirt with her initially, because if you didn't, then maybe it's just a playful coworker thing to say.
Right. If there's not a sexual innuendo in there somewhere, then it just becomes, I'm just joking. I didn't give you the night off. Oh, but yeah, whatever. Yeah, it's cool. It's cool.
Yeah.
Right.
So she is a straight shooter. We can get this pretty quickly. And she tries to maintain a professional distance. We see this when they bring back a chosen corpse to the Tempest, and of course, Dr. Tapero, we know at this point, is probably psyched, medically speaking, to examine this corpse. But the revelation that they make is not so welcomed. And Jal, being an Angara, is kind of shaken by this revelation that his people are being irreversibly turned into these monsters. And Dr. Tapero specifically says to Ryder, do not encourage Jal to hold out hope here, because for all the evidence that we can see, these people are gone. Mm-hmm. There's nothing left of them besides some traces of genomes. And so for all intents and purposes, there is no way to reverse this process now or in the near future. So don't do that to him.
Yeah,
because
don't
it's
give
not
false
fair.
hope. Yeah, that's false hope. That's not helpful. We need to deal in the truth.
And if I remember right, Ryder can backpedal, and after being told that, go, you know what? You're right. I'm sorry, Jal. And it kind of speaks to the fact that, as Dr. Tapero points out, it's okay. You're Jal's friend. I'm his doctor. And so I'm looking at him like a patient.
Right.
And so she does view things through that medical professional lens of keeping people at an arm's length, but also trying to be honest and transparent and fair with them.
Right. Yeah. Because sometimes the role of friend is to be more catering to somebody's emotions than to give them the facts in the moment because they're not ready for it yet.
Exactly.
Sometimes we willfully tell these little white lies to each other because we know that they're going to get to the truth. They just need to kind of go in the shallow end first. If that makes sense.
I know that Asari maturity, I don't know if it's linear to humans or like humans, where because Asari live 1,000 years, whereas humans might live a little past 100 in the Mass Effect universe. I'm not sure, if an Asari at 18 is the equivalent of the maturity of a teenager in human, in human terms. But I also feel in this conversation, this is where we can sense a difference in maturity between Dr. Tapero and Ryder, who, by the way, is quite young, as most people who came over with the initiative are, because you're trying to repopulate populate a new galaxy.
Yeah. Now, I would imagine after a few hundred years, even if you mature more slowly, you still have life experience that dictates, okay, this is probably the better way to handle this.
Yeah.
So all right.
I gained a lot of respect for Dr. Tapero there, but she also fulfills a number of other roles on the Tempest that we can talk about when we get back from the mid-break.
Yeah, let's go thank our patrons. We'll be right back.
Message coming in. Patching it through.
I am sovereign, and this station is mine. I like the sound of that.
All right, here we are in the middle of the show where we get to thank our patrons, and we don't have any new patrons this week, but we do have our Tier 5 Commander Shepherds who get shoutouts every week, and that includes Kolka Shins, Kira C, Lieutenant Tessino, Shep Vicarian. Words are hard. That's Spectre J and William. Thank you so much to all of you guys for your support, and to all 66 of our current patrons. You guys are amazing. I say this every week, but I mean it, and so I have to say it every week. We couldn't do it without you guys. You guys are the best. If you want to check out the Patreon, patreon.com/Mass Effect Lorecast is the place you can go. You can check out the lower tiers, get ad-free episodes, I don't ever mention this, but you get episodes a day earlier, which is cool if you want to listen a day earlier than everyone else. Also lots of other stuff you can get there. And we also have a new review. I don't believe we've read this one out yet. Did we? Do you remember one from Steve the Mage?
We have not read this one yet.
Yeah, I didn't think we read this one. This one came out. It was dated slightly before we recorded the last episode, because sometimes in my app they show up late. This is from Steve the Mage 91 in the United States, who writes, "Best Lorecast on the Citadel, 5 stars. Started with the Elder Scrolls Lorecast. Highly recommend if Elder Scrolls is your thing." Well, thanks, Steve. And was hooked immediately. But this was never a codex reader like Sam is. Like, my dude knows literally everything there is to know. You guys talk about missions I've never heard of and inspired me to dive right back in, and I'm hooked. I am a letter carrier, and having you guys in my ear all day talking about my favorite games really makes my day so much better. I am a Spotify listener and gave you 5 stars, but came here to give another 5 stars and leave a written review. Maybe I'll get to hear it on the show. I think you will. Tom, so much credit for always dishing out fresh and exciting content. Keep up the fantastic work. Plan on hitting either the Witcher Lorecast or Lord of the Rings Lorecast next. Love you guys. Mike CPS, the patron episodes are my favorite. Smiley face. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike. And Tom, didn't we just mention during episode 100 that every other person that writes in is like, I drive a truck or I am a mail carrier?
Yeah, I deliver things. Like either like I deliver for like UPS, I deliver the mail, I drive a truck, which is also delivering things. Lots of delivery people. But I totally get it. Like, I used to drive hours every day, like going to different customers and things. I covered the entire state. And so I listened to podcasts all day long because I was in the car forever. Like, I totally get it. But thank you for taking the time to do that. We really do appreciate it. And like you mentioned, Spotify is another place you can give us a rating. All of that stuff helps. Sharing with your friends, any of that stuff. We really do appreciate it. All right, let's move on with the rest of the show.
Spit it out, or are you trying to build suspense?
You're so dense, sir. Obviously, I do not know as much about human relationships as I thought.
All right, so back to Dr. Tapero. Dr. Tapero, as we've very well laid out at the beginning of this episode, tends to keep things pretty just business. Seems very straight-laced, very business, and yet, like you've noted, different from some of the other doctors we've met. Do you think that's a writing decision from the developers, like intentionally to create somebody that's just distinct and different, or what do you think?
Yes, I think so. And I think there's a multitude of reasons for that. Number one, we've mentioned it pretty much every time we've talked about the Andromeda Initiative. This is not a military operation. It's a civilian venture. And it is led largely by what's basically a corporation. So I implore you, Tom, and all of our listeners to consider what it would be like to have a doctor at your workplace constantly checking in on you.
Yeah.
Or you have to check in with them.
Right. Yeah, that's a little weird.
Right.
I don't know what else to say about that.
It's like, I would be a little guarded too, and I'm sure the doctor probably would too, because now it's not just your doctor, but it's also a coworker.
Right. Yeah. How does HR now work into that? Yeah, it gets a little bit funny.
Right. And it's not a military operation, so there's not that level of camaraderie, I think. Mm-hmm. You also have to remember that with Dr. Chakwas, she served with Dr. Anderson for a long time.
Right.
She was in the Alliance for a long time. She was probably coasting toward retirement years. And nothing was new to her. This was like, same stuff, different day. So she was probably a lot more at ease than maybe a young Asari doctor coming up on the big years of her career. Mm-hmm. So again, military operation, definitely going to be a lot less. The military is known for rules and procedure, but I'll tell you that from a lot of my friends who are in the military or were in the military, especially the ones in the Navy, when you're deployed and you're out at sea, a lot of those formalities get tossed because
especially during wartime.
Yeah. And for a crew like the Normandies that got bonded by such immense trauma, that got forged with like the hottest fire, you're just going to feel that level of closeness and camaraderie, especially more than people who, when, at the beginning of Andromeda, Dr. Tapero and Ryder are virtually strangers.
Right.
So
right.
It is different.
We also don't get a trilogy here, and we probably never will get an Andromeda trilogy. I would assume, because it didn't sell as well as the other games. But you could see how a character like this might start like this, and then over time, over a series of other games, you've got a character arc. Maybe she warms up a little bit. Maybe she does build a relationship with somebody because she's more ready to at that point, or whatever. But we don't get that. We just get one game.
Yeah, we only get one game to flesh out her character, which is a lot. It's a tall order, to put on developers to say, I'm going to compare this one game to this well-established trilogy that fans had, what would that have been, 5 years to play through over and over and over again? And how many hours of game time? So I'm not sure that comparison is fair either, but it could also just be her personality, Dr. Tapero's personality, that she's strictly business. Some people take longer to warm up than others. And as I just mentioned, she is virtually a stranger with Ryder at the beginning of Mass Effect. When you compare it to like Chakwas' interaction on the Normandy with some people that she served with for a while. Shepard, we don't know how long she served with. Anderson has served with for quite a while. But there's also one other thing. Dr. Tapero functions as your psychologist.
Okay, so she's like, obviously she's working not just on your body, but on your mind. So she's probably paying a lot of attention to you when you're not even in the room with her, talking about what's going on psychologically. Like she's probably filing reports.
Yes, she is. And she tells us that. She's transparent about it. She says that she's sending them to Pathfinder headquarters, which, although it's called headquarters, the whole practice still feels very corporate, much like Kelly's role in Mass Effect 2, who was hired by the Elusive Man to basically keep tabs on Shepard and Shepard's mental health.
This feels very similar to that.
It does feel similar, although, to be fair, the Initiative is not a human supremacist organization, so there's that.
Sure. But it is a corporation. It is a company, and it wants to maintain a watch on its assets. It wants to know, because people, and this is something everybody needs to realize, if you work for a company, if you work for a corporation, you're a person, but first and foremost, you're a tool for that company to make money. And any company is going to try to make sure that if they want to make money, well, they're going to keep their tools in good repair, right? So they're going to identify what needs to be replaced, what needs to be fixed, all of those things. And human beings are a little bit touchier than, say, a machine, but it's the same kind of thing. If somebody is psychologically breaking down, the company's going to want to know.
Yeah, it's a colonization effort, but it's, any colony is there it needs to make money to survive, right?
Right. But the people also have to survive too. So like, for example, if the commander of the team is psychologically breaking down, that could be very dangerous to the lives of the other people. So there might be other people who want to step in a way that wouldn't necessarily happen to somebody like Commander Shepard halfway across the galaxy on some sort of, war mission.
It would also make sense to be more cautious of riders' mental health. Hey, how are you handling all of this stuff that's been thrown into your lap?
Right.
Because your dad died?
Right.
Because Ryder's dad was an N7.
Right.
Ryder's dad was used to extreme stress.
Right. Well, and he's young, and a lot of the things on this expedition are not expected. There's a lot of stresses they didn't anticipate.
Exactly. Yeah. Future of humanity and whatnot on your shoulders. So we can find these reports in the Andromeda Codex under an entry called Ongoing Psychological Profile. And so we get to read the reports, which is nice. That's a transparent gesture. She doesn't have to do that, but it's also a fun thing for the player to see because these are formatted largely from your own choices in dialogue and through the narrative. So
creepy boss keeps making advances when I tell him no. Yeah.
She doesn't include that on the CC'd version that goes to Ryder. So as the name suggests, ongoing psych profile, this entry evolves throughout the game. And there are two major parts throughout the game where it updates, I think. So in most conversations, you can answer dialogue in Andromeda in one of four ways. There's the logical response, the professional, the emotional or passionate, and then like the casual or sometimes sarcastic one. And depending on your preferences for this and who, if anyone, you're romancing, you will get different permutations of this ongoing psych profile.
That's cool. Okay, so what are some examples?
So, for example, if you choose the emotional or passionate dialogue option very often, then you might get something from Dr. Tapero describing you something like, you exhibit heart and empathy in many situations. The passion you bring to your role as Pathfinder does not go unnoticed by those who work alongside you. In fact, it may be a key component in drawing others to you. Okay. But if you chose logic a lot, you get something more like, I've observed that you display a tendency towards analytical thinking and intellectual curiosity. When interacting with others, even difficult personalities, you consider the more grounded and non-emotional response.
I feel like that she would prefer that one because that's kind of who she is.
Maybe. I mean, she does open up at some points, but and sometimes with these different permutations in the ongoing psych profile, they get contradictory. And I remember mine was, especially if you choose logic, but then you also happen to do a bunch of interrupts with like the triggers, because that will get you something like, the logic that I just read, non-emotional response. And then it says something like, however, I would say that this is at odds with your tendency to act impulsively in many situations. You go on your gut rather than pause and wait for more information. So
you're all over the place. I don't know what's going on.
You're very logical and non-emotional. However, you're also very impulsive and tend not to wait for more information.
Your personality seems like a 13-year-old just clicking whatever random response they want with no uniformity.
Yeah, extreme fourth wall breaking, yeah.
Right.
So it can be confusing for players. I remember it was for me. But from a lore perspective, it adds depth to Dr. Tapero's job. And like I said, not those were about interrupts. Not everyone's going to take interrupts, so you're not always going to get those.
Right. Right.
But if you do, and you were wondering why it was contradictory to your logical responses, that's why. So Dr. Tapero is not there to just patch you up like Dr. Bonesaw or Hacksaw.
Yes. Dr. Hacksaw.
Dr. Bonesaw. Dr. Hacksaw is there to patch you up because, as the writers told us, her name was an anagram of hacksaw, like the old-timey field surgeon. So she's not just studying and researching she's not just studying and researching like Morden was on your ship. So she's doing both. She's there to patch you up. She's there to monitor your psych health. She's also there to do some research by herself as well. So she's fulfilling all of these roles and more.
It makes sense. I mean, it makes sense that they would design a character like this who would have all these roles. But I would also imagine that maybe the people on the ship feel uncomfortable around her. Is that a thing?
Yes. Well, if I were a writer, I would. This is a personal thing. Yeah. We can get pretty vulnerable with Dr. Tapero about our recently killed father and the memories of his that we are finding as this narrative progression tool. But, if you are in this situation, your dad died, you're finding memories of his that you never knew because he didn't talk about them. And you're being very vulnerable with Dr. Tapero. And she offers some advice on how to think through things. But if I knew she was filing reports about my mental health, man, I would not be vulnerable with her.
Yeah, there would be things that you just don't bring up.
Right. Sure. I would keep things 100. You know what I mean? I'd be like, that would be water cooler conversation all the way through.
Yeah. But I'm like, this sets up a chain of things, though. Like, I'm sure somebody who's as trained as she is would notice that you're not really opening up. And then you would end up having these sessions where they're like, you really can't open up to me. No, I'm fine. I don't have anything else going on. Okay. Well, like you end up in that loop. And then
Day says, I don't think it's that nefarious. Yes, but I also think that it's easy for us to think that because it's a game.
Right. And I don't know that, like, to Day's point, it's probably not nefarious.
Right.
I mean, you guys have played through this game. You are all like, she's fine. But in the moment, like, if you are a human being in that kind of moment and you know that you're being monitored and you know that there are powers out there who can make decisions about your future or the future of your project or whatever, it's just natural to be a little suspicious and careful about what information you reveal.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, who tells their boss everything? Nobody.
Not me.
Nobody does. And if you do, you probably done messed up.
and I don't think many bosses would want to know everything. But this element of being afraid to fully open up to your assigned counselor for fear that it could be used against you, that part about Andromeda is actually quite in line with what I've heard from military and law enforcement. Because in the military, I've been told, if you have an assigned counselor, it's almost like you're on a performance improvement plan. That's what they'd call it in the corporate workplace. Yeah. So if you have an assigned counselor, sometimes it's because you had to witness very traumatic things and it is a requirement that you do it. Mm-hmm. Other times it's like, I should probably be careful with what I say to them because anything I can say or anything I say can and will be used against me.
Right. It's not like regular, like if I go to my doctor today and I open up about some things, there's doctor-patient privilege there. But my doctor does not work for my same company. My doctor does not work for a military branch that we're both a part of. Like, there is no structure around that surpasses doctor-patient privilege. So,
right. So, like touching on that point earlier, we do lower our guard because of how much time we spend around Dr. Tapero and on the Tempest, and it's a video game, and it would be betrayal of the tallest order, right? To have someone in your own crew with no foreshadowing whatsoever, try to usurp you, and then you get fired and replaced by who? Cora? Well, Cora was saying how it was should have been her gig anyway, but that wouldn't happen because you're the main character of the video game, right?
Right. It would have to be some sort of major plot undertaking to move you out of that role, and then somehow you get back in that role, and it's like a whole series of quests, or maybe that's like the beginning of the second game where things go sideways in a way you don't expect, And
if they did that because you were too vulnerable with your doctor that they placed on your ship for you, that'd be, it would be hilarious. Don't get me wrong, but it would also be like, what the hell? What? I'm playing a game to escape.
Right. Yeah. It would have to be one of multiple reasons why they do the thing that they do. Right. Like, hey, we've decided to make some changes. Also, we've gotten word that there's some psychological issues. And it's like a justification for a thing that would have happened anyway because of multiple reasons. I don't know.
Yeah. And so you asked, does anyone really feel uneasy around her? Mm-hmm. Unequivocally, PB definitely does. PB does not like Dr. Tapero. They do not get along. And I think that PB even says that she thinks Tapero is viewing her crew as like experiments.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and kind of surprisingly, because of how we get to know Dr. Tapero and that she doesn't cross that line early on about, doctor-patient interactions. Well, we eventually find out that Dr. Tapero has been going to this bar and nursing a drink. And I'm saying like drinking in quotes here because she doesn't drink, but we find out that she's been going to this bar and sitting alone with a drink. And so you can approach, and here's where this next conversation, she really opens up and we find out a lot more about her personality.
Drink.
What's this really about?
PB thinks I don't care about the crew, that you're all just experiments to me. Is that how you think I see you?
Since when do you care what PB thinks?
It's not the first time someone told me that. In fact, every one of my exes said something similar. Hence why I'm taking a break from relationships.
So that's the real reason you said no to dinner. It wasn't because I'm not your type.
Yes, no. Don't change the subject. Is that how you think I see you?
You wouldn't be moping in this bar if you only saw me as an experiment.
I don't mope, but you're right. Thank you, Ryder. I should get back.
What about your wine?
I'll save it for another day.
That's a good dialogue. I like that one. That one, it can bring some things together. You get a glimpse of her. It's almost like there's this like very natural, obviously she's not human, but very human inability for self-awareness, and yet self-awareness at the same time about different things.
She's quite diplomatic in how she approaches it anyway, but she does lower her guard a little bit. She divulges some personal information about her own life to Ryder, that she has had some bad relationships, mainly because exes viewed her as being too clinical.
Right, right. And then the whole, you're moping. Well, I don't mope. And it's like, but you clearly are. Like, you're somehow you're not aware of the way you come across to other people when you're being too clinical or when you're being emotional. Both things. Like, there's this, disconnect there.
Well, I think it's a different scale, too, for Dr. Tapero. Being emotional for Dr. Tapero probably looks a lot different than being emotional for a Krogan, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah. But moping in a bar, I'm not moping in a bar. Well, you kind of are. If we could define this thing that you're doing right now as that. So
yeah. So it sheds a lot of light into what Dr. Tapero is actually considering, maybe what she's not saying. But she still does keep things very professional, and arguably, if I were to have to pass a verdict on who is the most doctor-like of all the physicians we've met in Mass Effect, as what I understand a doctor to be, and the stereotypical doctor-like qualities,
right?
It is Dr. Tapero.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. What a doctor should be doing in these situations, that kind of thing, as opposed to not necessarily every doctor has a different personality, but
right.
Yeah.
Dr. Hacksaw, obviously the old timey field surgeon, Dr. Morden, much more of the research geneticist, that kind of scientist.
Very much more researcher. Yeah.
And then Dr. Michelle, sketchy metagel dealer with a French accent.
Right. All right. Well, this is fun because it's neat to get these glimpses for me of characters that I really haven't spent much time with. So I appreciate it as well. This has been fun talking about all this medical stuff, a little bit stressful at times, but I'm sure we're going to move on to something probably a lot happier for next episode.
Yes, definitely happy things on the horizon, but not for next week. So for next week, we are going to be talking about the genophage.
That's not happy at all.
Nope, it's not.
No, that's terrible.
stillborn Krogan. If they are born at all. We gotta talk about the genophage. We talked about it very briefly about like 100 episodes ago.
We did. That was like one of the first 3 or 4 episodes, wasn't it?
Yeah. So, but we put it in the larger context of the Krogan rebellion. So now I think it's time to devote an entire episode to the genophage. And I also have much better audio equipment now, so it'll probably be much more pleasant to listen to.
It'll be a little bit better. Well, cool, man. I look forward to it, even though it's not a happy topic. It's a very interesting topic. And you got anything else going on you want to share before we head out?
Yeah, I'm streaming Neutral Shepard. Jerry Shepard has entered Mass Effect 2. I've already missed some interrupts on purpose.
Jerry or Gary? I thought you said Gary before, but maybe I'm misremembering.
It is Jerry, and I think I subconsciously chose that name because of Jerry from Rick and Morty.
Okay, yeah, because he's kind of bland. Yeah,
very bland, neutral, and kind of a weenie. So I've already missed some interrupts. Morden's assistant is dead because I refused to not be neutral.
Oh no!
And the neutral thing to do was the Batarian said, "We're gonna kill him," and then I was like, "No, you won't." Or wait, no, the response was something like, "We're gonna kill your friend." And then my response was, "He's not my friend."
He's not my friend. Like, fine.
Technically the truth, but okay. Well, now he's dead. They followed through. I mean, they died for it, but they followed through. So anyway, if you want to see some ridiculously bland and funny responses to dialogue, come and check out Neutral Shepard. I'm doing that every Saturday on Twitch. I'm still doing my Andromeda playthroughs. Had to skip it yesterday, but I am planning to stream some today after this Lorecast.
Cool. Yeah, go hang out with N7 the Legend. So
Twitch, yes, N7 the Legend.
N7 the Legend.
And Twitter.
Yeah, go check that out. I've got all my stuff, robotsradio.net, for all the different shows on the network, for my other shows. I'd love, if you are into any of the other fandoms, any of the other IPs that I do shows on, I'd love to have you come check those other shows out. And I've always got some other stuff kicking around. We still don't know when Starfield is launching. Bethesda, you got to tell us something. But if you were interested in keeping up with all the news and all the stuff, starfieldinsider.com is my new website I'm doing with Sam and some other people. So as things are worth reporting on or discussing or talking about the lore or gameplay, it'll go up on there. And you can always listen to the Starfield Lorecast. That's what I got going on. And we will see you guys next week when we talk about, yay, the genophage. Woo! All right. Well, I guess we're going to go. Bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Mass Effect Lorecast. We'd love to hear your opinion and thoughts on the lore of Mass Effect. Reach out to us on Twitter at Mass Effect Cast, or check out the Robots Radio Discord. Also, you can send us an email at masseffectlorecast@gmail.com.